Batu, Marana, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive!
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
What do you want to do? My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very good, thank you. I'm not so bad. We've done our season. We've gone through what has been our longest season. As you sort of said in the end of the last episode, we've covered from 1930 up to 2020. We've already done 90 years of science fiction cinema. And at the halfway point, we did a reach back for the first part. We covered Just Imagine all the way through to Howard the Duck, and we gave our ratings and our thoughts. And today we're back, and we're going to do the second half of the series, and we'll probably give a little bit of an overview of the whole series. But we're going to start from The Running Man and go up to Possessor, and we're going to talk about those, given our scores and our thoughts on each of these.
Well, I just can't believe we're done with series 4. Like, this was the most ambitious, season we've ever done. I mean, this was a year-long project.
Yeah.
Of 26 episodes bi-weekly, each running close to 2 hours or so. Really, not to mention bonus episodes, things like this. And it's hard to believe. At the beginning I thought we'll never get through this, and now here we are at the end. It's pretty amazing. We're ambitious fucks, man.
Yeah, no, and we've got more to come. I mean, it's one of the things I would say is that this season has done, like you say, it seems to have given us a license to think bigger, and also it triggered a couple of things for us to be like, oh, actually, there's other bits and pieces we want to talk about, but aren't really, required for the main feed. And so now on Patreon, we are doing a series of bonus things where there's sort of, we've done THX 1138 4B, the original short that George Lucas did at California University. We did Battle Royale 2, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series, Transformers, the original TV series, Hard to Be a God, 1989. Yeah. And then and Blade Runner 2049, the prequel episodes, or the prequel shorts,
right?
And then the short that was created alongside Possessor. So we did a lot of
quite a bit
supplemental material, really,
which is especially impressive considering it was already the longest season we'd ever done. And 26 episodes is quite a bit to especially to add stuff to.
Yeah, so I'm going to pat ourselves on the back. I think it's well deserved. I think we've done a great job. And what I would say is as well, just before we jump into these, is I'm looking at the list. I've got the list up just up next to me. I'm looking at it thinking we did. It's the diversity of the stuff that we have covered on this series is been really good fun as well. Like we've done. We've had what was it? Song and dance numbers from the 30s. We've had French New Wave cinema. We've had Star Wars, Star Trek, the first Marvel film, through to
popular stuff like Transformers and Running Man. To a bunch of foreign stuff. Yeah, whether it's time crimes, Hard to Be a God.
Yeah, some really interesting sort of. We've covered the gamut of things. I think so. I'm really pleased with it. I'm really chuffed. Yeah, with what we've achieved. So today we are going to cover and we're going to go back and score. So we're going to put a number on it. Yeah, 12 films. So we're going to cover off. We're going to talk them through. So we might as well jump in because we've got to sort of get through them all. We are going to go back to the mid-season start. 1987, The Running Man. This is the Arnold Schwarzenegger semi-satire, I think, really, is what we sort of landed on. Yeah. Well, any remaining thoughts? I think we just go back and have a quick chat about The Running Man before we put our scores in.
I think that I don't remember The Running Man very well. And I know you're a bigger fan than I am. I just I think its hokiness is less charming to me than it is to you. It's one of those movies where like I never mind when it's on TV. To see it again. I never mind. I can kind of like tune it out and I don't feel like I'm, like committing some crime against art by, writing at the same time or something or answering an email. But then in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, it's not. I always wish it were like Total Recall, instead.
Yeah, it's one of those films that does feel a little bit like a missed opportunity, doesn't it? It's one of those where you sort of, as we watched it, you sort of go, oh, okay, there's a real strong nugget of Verhoeven sort of like satire running through this, but it's not quite RoboCop or Starship Troopers or Total Recall. But it's still fun. I'm not going to lie. Like you said, the charm is there. Jesse Ventura's Captain Victory, Buzzsaw, all the runners and the gladiators. I just think it's there is a charm to it. It's nonsensical. Like it's one of those that sort of like it runs with an idea, but doesn't expand on the world and stuff like that. But it's a successful Arnie film for me. I think it's one of my, it's one of those good 80s. It's very 80s.
Oh yeah.
But I do quite enjoy it.
Well, it's sort of like, what year is it? I mean, 87.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a stepping stone, and Arnie's career better than I do. Between like the encouragement that is Commando, and like Total Recall and stuff like that. That's sort of prime Arnie.
This came out the same year as Predator.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So this is this sort of 87 is a bit of a turning point for him because it sort of leads him up to a series of different films he was trying to do. So he's not the embarrassment. I still like Commando, but I acknowledge that it's even more hokey, badly edited, and badly acted. It's better than that. But I also find that this film, one of the things we sort of picked up on was the I'm gonna say the sexual politics of this film really did not age well. Like he kidnaps a woman. She is then forced into taking part in the running games, but eventually falls in love with Arnie, possibly. But he basically grabs her around the neck and walks off with her at the end of the film. So
literally, this is not an exaggeration. Yeah, that is true. And I think that the world doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, there are a lot of post-apocalyptic or post-fascist sort of worlds where you end up thinking like, yeah, I mean, this makes sense as an idea on paper. I have no idea how this would function. And this is definitely one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's all sort of show. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, even the film itself sort of like falls for its own what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like its own flash and bravado. Because you go, oh, like this idea of the show, the Running Man, is amazing. But then you try and apply it and go, how does this work in a society? You go, it doesn't matter. Just watch the show. Just watch the show, and that's sort of its point. So yeah, it's one of those odd films that decries violence as a sport, but then wants you to enjoy violence as a sport. So,
but that's very Verhoeven, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like boy, what a terrible society that would make RoboCop. Well, but they already have, so we might as well watch them shoot people in the face.
That's
you
it,
know?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, but it looks cool, and you're like, okay, it does. You're right. I mean, the joy for me is Arnie is good in this, but I think that having Richard Dawson as Damon Killian is also a
oh
genius
yeah,
stroke
yeah.
in this. Like he works wonderfully as a sort of like diva,
Foil.
yeah, like
Yeah.
game show host, sort of like sort of. So it has those
No, he
moments.
sort of steals the show. He's very good.
Yes,
I will say that the sort of very sort of late '80s sort of Arnie like quips, sort of that definitely recall sort of Batman and Robin for me. And there are ones that work and ones that are just sort of like, oh yeah. I mean, I will say I like it better than Batman and Robin. I do think it works better than Batman and Robin. But that may not be a high bar.
no, no, but I agree. I think, like you say,
No, you're like, at least Arnie isn't in a Mr. Freeze costume.
yeah. The thing is, like, what's funny is you say about the puns and those one-liners. What's hilarious, and I agree, is the fact that some of them do land and land well, and there is a pun quality to them, sort of like um, when he cuts Buzzsaw in half, and he's like he had to split, and there's other bits like that, and you go, hey, and then there's ones where he's just calling Electro, he's like, come on, Christmas tree, chase me, light bulb, and you're like, this is the same person writing this script. It's come up with the other bit. Like, is this the best you could do with? So yeah, it is a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not going to lie.
But I mean, it's good enough that we both want like a redo. We both want,
oh yes,
definitely like the Running Man with that sort of Verhoeven-esque thing. Even done more violent, even put a little bit of one of the things that I think for me is unfortunate for the Running Man is I like that. Obviously, we're both huge Verhoeven fans, but I'm also such a huge fan and kind of like grew up with the original Rollerball,
yes,
which is sort of like all the violence, none of the fun,
yeah,
none of the quippishness, and maybe my own personal tastes tend more toward that end of the spectrum.
yeah. No, I think there's a remake to be made here. Okay, so score time. What are we giving?
I gave this a 5.75.
Oh, okay. I've actually I had to go back and think about it. I gave this a 6. So
we're close.
Yeah. There's enjoyment there. I understand that this isn't a great film, but
so you were surprised I was that high?
I am. I was expecting like a 4.5 or a 5 at least. But
oh no! This is definitely better than like a 5 is like nah. This is definitely better than that. This is a lot to recommend it. I think I can't quite go 6 because 6 is like
getting into good film territory.
Solid stuff. That's 6.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, all right, let's talking about solid stuff. Let's talk about Waterworld.
Oh, please, let's.
Yeah, 1995.
Yeah, this is not one that needs a remake.
No.
No, this was painful. It was more painful than I remember, frankly. I mean, I remember this as sort of like, yeah, there's some good stuff in that. And the older I get, the more I watch it, I'm like, right. No, I watched that as a kid and thought there were good stuff in that. It's not completely void of interesting ideas, but none of it works to the point where it's salvageable.
No, it's an odd one. I mean, no, I agree. I mean, you watched the shorter version as well, and the shorter version is clearly too long as well. I watched the longer version, I forgot what it's all called now, but the full cut, as it were, the director's cut, doesn't add a great deal into it. Doesn't really help it in the slightest. It just is a longer version of what you've already been watching. The crux of this film, the crux of the problem I have with this film is the fact, and I think we covered it when we talked about it, I think Kevin Costner is a huge miscast. The more I think back on it, the more I realise what a huge miscast it is. And that he and Dennis Hopper are clearly making two different films. And I think I want to watch the Dennis Hopper film.
Absolutely. No, you're completely right. I mean, it's these sort of like Mad Max, late Mad Max, sort of
Yeah,
like, yeah, we
Thunderdome
know
Mad
this.
Max. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, if Waterworld needs Running Man energy to
yes,
sustain it, and if Running Man has an incoherent version of the future, Waterworld is like, hold my beer,
yeah,
like I mean, it's totally incoherent. And so for that kind of, but I mean, it does have some kind of, the quest idea is decent, I mean, there's an evocative part here.
Mm.
It's just buried under, under stuff that takes itself way too serious. I mean, the Exxon Valdez makes no sense, but
Yeah. But
I
I
agree
love the
with you
idea of it. I
completely.
love the idea. This is the thing.
Yeah.
It's like I went back. This isn't recent. I was on YouTube and there was something about Waterworld. It's one of those like pitch ideas. There's shorts that are pitching the idea, and it showed a clip, and it has that clip of Dennis Hopper sat in the back of a Cadillac riding around inside the Exxon Valdez, throwing
Hmm.
cigarettes to people, and I'm like, this is insane. Like, if you were to see that clip and you were like, oh, this is an entire film and they're on a boat and it's it's Waterworld, you'd be like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And then you watch a 10-minute sequence of Kevin Costner riding a boat and just being grumpy, and you're just like, yeah, it's just, he wasn't designed for this. I mean, this is not to say I dislike Kevin Costner. Like, I recently watched JFK, I've watched a couple of
Watch
other things.
Yellowstone.
Yeah,
And
like the guy's he's good. Like, I like Kevin Costner and things. Like, I think he has a certain energy I enjoy when he's in the right thing. I like Field of Dreams. I think there are certain films I enjoy.
yeah,
This
he's not
isn't.
bad in the right part. He's
No,
been in a
exactly,
lot of Man of Steel, a lot of bad parts where he was miscast.
exactly. Yeah, for some reason they keep like he did a following in the sort of the footsteps of the aging action star. Like, he did one called
Mm.
3 Days, I think. That he did a couple of years ago, and I watched that. I'm not recommending it. It's dreadful. Because again, it feels like, oh well. Funnily enough, as I was watching it, I kept thinking, this feels like this should be Mel Gibson.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
I was thinking Mel
Which
Gibson
is
should
a
be.
phrase nobody has ever said in human history, but
No,
okay.
no, well, not since since his incident. I don't think. But yeah, I'm not going to defend him, but I do. No, I'm not going to go there. That's controversial. Uh, but I'm not that I agree with. I just find that Mel Gibson had an energy in the 80s and
Mm.
90s, like Mel Gibson as Martin
Well,
Riggs
the
or
Lethal Weapon
as
kind of,
yeah,
yeah,
you chose him for those
goofiness.
things, and
Yeah.
I've seen films he's done post being pushed out of Hollywood, and he still has that energy. And there is that thing where I'm
So
like, grizzled Mad Max would have been cool.
I'll tell you what the thing about Costner is, and I agree with you. Like, I mean, I like him in sort of that run of stuff of like JFK and stuff like that, Field of Dreams.
Mm.
But what's interesting is both of those movies. The thing is, people confuse him for an everyman, and he's
Yes,
not really. He can't really play an everyman. Both of those movies, he's an obsessive everyman.
yes,
He's an everyman figure, but he's really like utterly obsessed and utterly crazy, right? But he comes off as kind of like that Republican, straight laced,
yes,
conservative version of like he would be great in a remake of Falling Down, you know,
yes.
that he's that kind of everyman, and everyman who's headed and is a little too obsessive, right? But he's got to have an edge to him. And when he's cast as these kind of straight everyman characters, it never works.
No,
And Waterworld, he's supposed to be, you know, like he's not really obsessive. He's just, I'm a badass, relatable. He's not relatable. I mean,
no.
Kevin Costner is flat, and that's why it works with him being obsessive, but not relatable.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you say, it's not because he in this like he needs to be grumpy, and you need to see an arc of him becoming, the little girl and the woman sort of like break through that hardened shell and sort of stuff. But there is no emotional arc. Like, he's the grumpy sod at the start of the film, and he's just a vengeful grumpy sod at the end of the film. But like, I never feel like there's that transition, where I think other actors would have made this a much better film.
Yeah. So what did you give this?
I gave it a 5.
Oh wow, I gave it a 4.
Oh, okay. I couldn't because there was I gave it a 5 because of the Dennis Hopper stuff and because I think the ending.
Ah,
We said this like there are flashes of this like when they're attacking when Dennis Hopper's stuff is attacking the floating town
mm,
and at the end when the mariner Kevin Costner attacks the boat and he does a lot of stuff on that and it's all the stuff with the plane, all that stuff's pretty good. It's not Kevin Costner's the weak link, but I'm liking some of that stuff, and so there's bits I like. So
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I would just say that both of those sequences don't work at all. Like, the attack on the flotilla is just like, where are all these guys coming from? How is this being strategized? I mean, none of this. I'm just like, at some point, I'm totally taken out of the action. I'm like, okay, this is the like third team of like guys on skis who are flying, and getting
I'm loving all
mowed
that.
down in a
Don't
field of
care. Don't
oil.
care. It doesn't. You're right. It doesn't work. However, I'm still loving it in the same way that
Yeah.
I would love Mad Max. And then I'm going like, we know that petrol doesn't work this way. We know that
Yes.
like machines shouldn't work this way.
But the
Um,
same thing's true on the Valdez, where
mm,
it's like, right, your plan is to blow it up with you on it, like
yeah,
and you're gonna sink the number of boats that sink in this world where there's nothing, humanity is reduced to a few boats. This
yeah.
is what you want to be a little less cavalier.
Yeah, they
I
should be
mean, I
fighting
don't
it
know.
to save the boat. I mean, the film to me is encapsulated in the man that rides around in the oil in the little boat on
Mm,
the Valdez, and then he drops the flare down there. And he just says, "Oh, thank God."
mhm.
That's sort of how you feel towards the end of this film, and you're like, "Oh, this is the finale, thank God." Um,
Well, the important thing is that they didn't have any of those liberal solar panels. They decided, like, the world ended.
yeah,
Let's push on with oil. It's oil or bust.
yes, that's the '90s for you. Um, yeah, so I think that's fair. I think that's sort of 5, but we're going to move on.
We're close. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because the next one's an interesting one, um,
Absolutely.
and was a bit of a hidden gem. So we've gone with 2
Yeah.
mainstream films so far, but now we're going to be talking about Dark City from 1998, which I've watched a couple of times, and this is, I still think, is massively underrated and doesn't get talked about enough. And really, for all the weird films that were made in the '90s were really like an auteur
Mm.
era and stuff. And this film just seems to get forgotten about, and I think it's bizarre. But Dark City is a great film.
Yeah, I agree. And I completely agree with you. And it also is, artsy. It's so, I mean, the German expressionism is just
Mm,
on its sleeve. That combined with this fascinating sci-fi premise that's very Inception-like. I mean, it's very, the Matrix inspired all of these sort of everything is wrong sort of plots. This is doing that earlier.
mm.
Um, you know, that seems such a 90s or 2000s sort of thing. This is right up there. Plus, with that German expressionism, it's literally dark. It's literally gothic. Um, it's it fits that 90s sort of like, the main difference between like 80s and 90s music is like synthesizer pop gives way to like, it's all dirty and nothing matters and we're angry.
Yeah,
This is such a 90s movie in that respect too. And I agree with you. It's totally maddening that this has sort of disappeared.
it's one of those weird things that everyone I've spoken to about this film that's seen it says how much they likes it, but no, it never seems to have had like a resurgence, which is kind of interesting. And you're right. I think this has been overshadowed by The Matrix, which we one day we'll talk about The Matrix, and it might get controversial. But there's something about this film. I think the cast are great. I love the fact that this film has this also sort of, you say about the German impressionistic thing, but also this like pulpy Art Deco
Mm.
like detective story as well at the heart of it as well, like this they break into that detective that's lost his mind, and they break into his room, and there's all the swirls and the papers up there, and it's all sort of like, it's so evocative of each scene is so wonderfully weird and stuff, and has some great ideas. Kiefer Sutherland's good in it when there's a scene where he's in the water and they're telling him to get out when they talk, and he's like, no, I'm staying here because they don't like water. This is the only place I'm safe. Like, this is the only place they won't monitor me. And there's just these really creepy moments about these dark entities. The downside of this film, or I do want to be balanced, the downside of this film is this idea that when the big reveal is played out, there are still questions. Quite big and fundamental questions when you're a bit like, well, how does this work? What happens next? How long has this been going on for? How many generations and that sort of thing? But it feels like it could do more at the end, but I still like what it does.
I agree. I think sort of this and Strange Days both sort of need to be canonized as sort of quintessential 90s sci-fi. And both have just kind of disappeared. Obviously, I agree with you that, at the end, there are scenes and special effects and ultimately the plot falls apart, if you push on it hard enough. But it's still really good. I mean, and like you say, nobody who's seen this doesn't like it. But both this and Strange Days kind of just like disappear into the memory a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like you remember I like it, but you don't remember all of those details, So I don't know. I feel bad about this movie that it hasn't had more success. But I also feel like this is something that both you and I we want to trumpet. We want to say this deserves another look.
Yeah, I think there's almost like a top 10 like 90s movies that should be remembered. This, Strange Days. I'd say I'd even vote for Gattaca. There's others as well where you're like, those sci-fi films that seem to have, people remember like Johnny Mnemonic, but they don't remember this.
Yeah, that's very strange. Yeah. And I mean, like Johnny Mnemonic versus Strange Days is a more straight up comparison, and I think Strange Days is more interesting.
Yeah.
But Dark City is like you definitely do see sort of pre-Matrix kind of, in the darkness and the aesthetic look and everything else. And it's interesting, like if we do go back in time and sort of imagine what a Dune directed by what's his name? Not Aronofsky. We imagine
the one that failed.
Jodorowsky. Yeah, if we imagine like a Jodorowsky's Dune and a different timeline for cinema than sort of Star Wars versus that, which I think is much more hypothetical. Imagine if Dark City had been Matrix a year and a half earlier, and Alex Proyas became like the Wachowski siblings, and like suddenly Alex Proyas could make whatever the hell he wanted in Hollywood, and his version of Speed Racer.
I was just gonna say
that would have been so awesome, right? Like, what would he have done?
A really dark and twisted Speed Racer. I'm pretty sure he'd probably gone for some slightly different properties, but yeah, no. There's just something about this film that I just find hugely appealing. And I would probably say, as I get older, and maybe my sensibilities are changing somewhat, I find this film more appealing than The Matrix. I don't know. There's just something I can take from this. Anyway, so what
So I gave it a 7.5.
Oh, so did I.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, 7.5. That is a good.
Once you're right, Scott.
Yes. I think the next one though could be very different. So we're going to leave the depths of the dark city, and we're going to go to the bright countryside of somewhere in animated America, and we're going to talk about 1999's The Iron Giant by Brad Bird. This one I still really enjoy. I know, I think we appreciate there are some issues, but there's a nostalgia element to this. I saw it in the cinema, and I really enjoy going back to this. I just think there's something about this that sort of works for me. The animation's good. I think the characterizations are good. I think it has problems, but I understand why this is sort of considered a cult classic. What about you?
Yeah, I'm of two minds. I mean, there are elements here that I really like. Obviously, like I like the animation style. I mean, I like the boy and his robot kind of stuff. Um, all that stuff sort of works. Obviously, I'm glad this movie exists. I'm glad that, I mean, it's been very influential. It's hard not to give it points for that, right? On the other
Yeah,
hand, the movie doesn't really work for me as a movie. Um, those elements work for me. Those scenes work for me. The junkyard doesn't work for me. I mean, that's straight out of a Michael Bay movie. I mean, the whole nuclear finale doesn't work for me. I mean, like that makes a million crappy 80s movies seem logical by comparison. I mean, so I was sort of disappointed, sort of revisiting this and seeing it all the way through, potentially for the first time.
mm,
Um, you know, but I also I would say I'm not tainted by the nostalgia for it,
yeah.
in the same way.
No, I'd say that's fair, because I think that's the thing is there's a kid element to this for me, because I have that thing of, like you said, the boy and the robot, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's
Mm.
cool, and the whole, I still get that sort of bit with the Superman kind of thing sort of still gets me, and all that sort of stuff. Like it works for me. Like I know a
Mm.
nuclear bomb dropped on America's is ludicrous.
I know General's
But,
eager to do it too, right? Like,
well, the general isn't. It's the G man. It's the general who's like, no, you chose to do this. You've got to face. We're all dead now. You've got to face this too, which is ridiculous in itself because they are a bit like we should, have something a bit more infrastructure in place to deal with this. But I don't know. This is ET. This is
mm,
a replacement for Bumblebee. I mean, that's obviously was redone. Obviously, the film is a girl and a robot, but it has that sort of thing, isn't it? That same mentality of there are parts of Bumblebee that are a complete lift from
hmm
this. The idea of like try and hide, and then you know
oh yeah,
that sort of stuff. And so
yeah,
yeah,
and I mean, I would love to. I've really wanted us to do ET, because that's a movie that is so influential. It belongs on a list of classic sci-fi stuff, but it's almost like take it for granted because
mm,
it's part of the cultural landscape. But unlike like Indiana Jones, that everybody watches every night, right? Like, I mean, it just seems like
well,
everybody watches
that's
Star
how I
Wars.
live my life.
Scott at the Weatherly household, every night ends in Ghostbusters. It's like, all right, kids, gather around the fire. Damn it, you get Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones, or I don't know.
Well, as they get older, the list slightly changes. I start to introduce like the Halloween franchise. Then, as they get older,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So, but I suspect ET, people don't watch, but I suspect it holds up
mm,
pretty decently, and actually some of its themes have grown and shown themselves to age well and be more mature. And I think that Bumblebee, while, I mean, it's got problems, the stuff, the boy and his robot, the girl and the robot stuff fires at a much higher rate for me. Now it's obviously, years later, it's a girl in the robot, so she's older. I I find the boy in this very flat and uninteresting, and sort of generic.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, it's it exists in this film exists in a weird transitional time as well in animation. This is 4 years after Toy Story. Pixar is starting to pick up. Disney is having trouble at this point. I mean, this is the period of, although I love Lilo and Stitch, but this is like Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, Atlantis, the sort of almost like the lost years of Disney. Brother Bear, the ones that nobody seems to remember. And so this comes out, and it's sort of, I think one of the reasons I do think this stands taller is because animation elsewhere was in transition. And this sort of uses CG animation in a 2D way, but does it well and sort of integrates it. And so this just stands up for this era as, oh, this is the good animated film that everyone likes from the late 90s, because there's not a great deal for it to go up against. And so I do recognize that as well. But for me, it still works. I still really enjoy this film. So
what's your rating?
I give this a 6.5, 6.5.
I gave it a 6.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So we're pretty close there. So 6.5.
Yeah, 6.5, and that's it. Okay, very different. No kid in it. We're going to
same movie. So interestingly, the Iron Giant was remade as the next one, Battle Royale.
Well, this is, I was going to say, we go from a kid and their robot to a kids and their machetes, crossbows and machine guns, and poisons, to the year later, 2000s Battle Royale. I'll let you start.
I have a feeling this one will be more divisive. So, I mean, I selected this. This one just works for me from start to finish. If anything, I want it to be like twice as long. I love it. All the stuff that bothers you are sort of like, bad editing, cheap filming. I mean, outside of a few day for night shots, like, just does not bother me. I'm just charmed and moved by this movie almost from start to
finish. Yeah. I see. It's one of those things. When I was looking at this list and getting ready for this, like, I reflect on these, and it's one of those films that I understand its influence. I understand why this film stands up, and I do think there's a period like 98 to about 2002, this sort of transitional period in cinema where, like, we do get a bit of a shift, and this is one of those films that really sort of like struck out. Where people, this is one of those sort of it's a culturally Japanese film. It's not just a Japanese film, it's a culturally Japanese film that landed in the rest of the world and worked. Like, people took to it, and people were like, oh, there's a whole ream of other cinema that we can watch and things. So I understand why, and I do see there are parts of this film that work really well, and I find that some of the characters are fascinating. I think some of the ideas are really good. But yeah, I can't get past, as you say, some of the really odd choices. Like I said, there's some terrible editing, but also there are bits that just don't work for me. Some of the bits just run flat. And so,
I think that whole lighthouse sequence.
The whole thing with those, the whole thing with the girls,
like
and the screaming, and then they poison and they shoot, and it's some of the worst acting of death acting, and it's just messy and
I can see the acting. I mean,
but the idea is fine, but even that, there's parts. So if that scene, for example, they've all been clubbing together, but then the paranoia sets in, and all this other stuff, and then there's like that, the bullying, and it all goes from there. But I don't know, it just feels too quick. It's one of those that sort of like, they sort of, it jumps from sort of like set piece to set piece to set piece very quickly. Yeah. And because of that, I'm like, I don't get to sort of, that's a scene where you're like, right, as you said, make the film a bit long, because it's not that long. Make the film a bit longer and have a scene like that play out where you are trapped in that lighthouse with them, and you're like, this is tense, and this is problematic, and you don't know who to trust, and so when they do turn, it feels like a really big thing. Otherwise, it just feels a bit like, skip over it. Next one, you've seen that death. Skip on to the next one.
That's
And
true. That's fair. And in the miniseries of this, right, the Netflix miniseries or whatever, that whole lighthouse bit
That's an
would be a
episode.
whole episode.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it
exactly.
would be a great episode, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like, oh wow, that's like that Walking Dead episode that sort of like it is following its own kind of characters and its own little like play for 45 minutes that works in what is mostly a bad show. But this would be that episode where it's just
the bottle episode.
great. They were all dead.
Yeah. When they often
Yeah.
do those bottle episodes where they're like, right, we're going to have one set and we're going to do this group of people, usually for budgetary reasons, but like sometimes they work really well because you've got to be innovative. That would be great. But it's just, and again, one of the things I had
Doing it in 5-10 minutes is probably
that's where it starts to feel a bit, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, losing its impact. I think one of the things that this film did for me was it sort of, I got tired of the, it's because it's a bloodbath. Yeah, by the end of it, you're a bit desensitized even within its own rules. I'm just like, okay, the next thing.
That's so funny to me because you've watched like all the Friday the 13th, all the like Freddy Krueger, all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've seen so little of any of that. The like real. I mean, I've seen a couple Saw movies and Hostels and stuff, but I mean, I've seen so little of the sort of like classic violent splasher stuff. And whereas I have no problem with this, and I'm just like, I love this violence. For some reason, that's
it's a different structure, and I think that's
soaked in blood.
Yeah, I think that's I'm definitely in many ways. But I think one of the things that's interesting on that point is the difference between those two genres is when you get to, especially like the slasher genre. The slasher genre in it at the heart is a mystery. It's like and then there were none, the sort of the Agatha Christie mystery that
I love it.
The name has changed a number of times,
including Clue.
Clue, I love Clue. I watched this recently. Clue is a fantastic film. But it's that mystery at the heart of it. It's a slasher film. Is each of the deaths either remove a suspect or introduce a suspect, or there's something else. So each of the deaths and the kills are not only inventive, they're sort of, if it's done well, for the most part, it'll serve the plot, or it'll serve something, or it's an inventive kill. I could get that, but with this, it's the carnage. Like, there's a key plot running through it, and then it's sort of like a side quest, a computer game. You're like, we're going to follow these characters, but whilst we're here, we're going to watch these girls die. Move on to the next one, and it's sort of there's a little bit of that to it that it.
So you would say this is sort of more like a late installment in one of those slasher franchises where they just up the carnage, and you're like, right, you forgot the mystery and the plot and making me care about the characters, which was there in the original movies we liked. And
exactly,
yeah.
But there's characters in this that work. I mean, the two main characters that get to the end and stuff. Like the ending, I like the ending of this film, and not because it's ended, but the whole finale with the guy, the PE teacher, and when you learn about who he is and his, and all that other stuff. Apart from when he gets shot and then gets back up again is weird. But
I like that. But
but I think overall, I think the ending is impactful and works. It's one of the best bits of the film for me. He's one of the best bits, like him introducing the whole concept and killing people off at the beginning. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Yeah. That film is that scene is really well done. He's clearly having a ball, but like not chewing up the scenery that much. But there's a whole bit in the middle where it sort of it just feels a bit, the pacing's all over and that sort of thing. So, but I do get why this film's important. Like, I understand its place in cinema history, but it's not one I would revisit often, or maybe even again, to be honest.
Wow. Well, I mean, I would just add, I find it entertaining from start to finish. And so although I notice, I know that I note that influence. I'm more moved by what it's gesturing at in terms of adolescence and all of and the cruelty of kids and all of these things. I'm more moved by that. Little gestures in that direction do it for me. I don't need the 20 minutes of kids talking to each other about how sad life is or some shit. I'm bored by that. Just have them kill each other and give me some grace notes, and I'll cry at those grace notes. But I'm never bored in this movie. I mean, there's no point at which I'm not just like glued to the set, enthralled. So I gave this an 8.25.
This may be, I don't know if we've had this. I gave this a 5.5.
Okay. Maybe one of the biggest gaps, close to a 3-point gap that we've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that thing, you were saying when you said about the
5.5 is not bad.
No,
Yeah,
no, it's not bad. I mean, like you said, there's good stuff in this, but it's not quite a 6. Do you know what I mean? It's not where I'm like, okay, there's stuff I'm taking from this. Okay. So from the sweat and grime of the murderous jungle to the outer reaches of the galaxy, to 2005's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, directed by Garth Jennings, and starring a quite a large cast of oddbods. But what are your thoughts then on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
And talented oddballs. I don't think this is going to be a split vote like the last one.
No.
I mean, I think we both love this. And it's not without certain flaws. We talked about them in the episode. Sort of, the POV gun special effects still bothers me for some reason. It's such a minor thing, but that weighs on me. But this is a classic, but also I kind of feel like not only is this a good Hollywood movie and a good Hollywood sci-fi movie that gets at so much of what we like, and and how we see the world, but the universe, but also I think like the world would be a better place if everybody in it watched this movie.
Yeah, yeah. I think I agree. I think there's something about this film that it wasn't a huge success. It wasn't a success that they thought it was going to be. I mean, they thought this was going to be like the Men in Black or the next sort of like big sci-fi franchise. It's very quintessentially British. I mean, the whole thing, obviously Douglas Adams being English, it has that sensibility, it has that humor, and I don't think it always translates well. I think you and I sort of share some of that humor, luckily, so we sort of were able to enjoy that. But they've Hollywoodized it enough that I think it's mainstream without being too Hollywood, and it maintains a quirkiness that I really enjoy. I think Martin Freeman as Arthur Dent is perfect casting. The more I reflect on it, the more I think he's this sort of frustrated middle Englishman is wonderfully casted. I think he works so well. And him against, I'm saying, Sam Rockwell as Zaphod Beeblebrox. It's just even now I'm like, it's just he is excellent. However, I do think that there's an element of this. I can see why people don't get this, like how you would market this, because it's not it's not action in it. Like, it's, you watch the trailers and it's almost badged as almost like as a Men in Black, like an actiony kind of film. They sort of focus on some of that bits. And it's not that. And I think, this is where I think the problem lied with this film and in its reception. But I just don't. Yeah, you're right. There are points I don't like, but there's something about this film that just works for me. Like, that's just so good. I think, and also having watched the 81 version, the original TV version, it fixes problems that we identified in that as well. Like Trillian is actually a way more proactive character in this and been explained.
It's a more diverse cast.
The much more diverse cast. The quest for for the point of view going being
Necrothea.
introduced, Magrathea, sort of like the whole quest makes more sense. It has a justification. There's reasons for it. So it sort of tidies up this version. So I don't know, it just works. And go on, sorry.
Well, Sam Rockwell is, I mean, this is one of my favorite Sam Rockwell parts, and I love Sam Rockwell. I mean, eventually we'll do Moon, but I mean, Sam Rockwell is a joy to see. I mean, which is probably the wrong term for a guy who's like famous for being swarmy, but he is just a joy to see on screen. So many of these actors are. I agree with you. Even like the design. The design of the ships is amazing. The design of all of it is just fantastic. I think it's hard to beat the, while it's got some problems, it does seem like they ran out of money. It's hard to beat the planetary design stuff at the end. Like, boy, that's hard to sell.
Yeah.
And you could do that and have it fall on its face. You can do that and have it seem just cheap and not have that sense of splendor and wonder. This has that sense of splendor and wonder that sells this film. And to me, this movie's got, it's not dumb enough to succeed with America. Okay. I mean, it doesn't have enough punchy. But it's got so much heart and it's so entertaining.
Yeah, one of the things that, you're right. Heart is one of the things I think that this film does have, but also I think, like you said, the aesthetics. I wanted to talk about that. Is like, yes, there's some issues I think in a couple of scenes where let's say the point of view going when they get to Magrathea looks a bit shaky. It's not the best. It looks a bit TV set, but the Vogons. I love the Vogons in this. They are phenomenal. Yeah. They're one of my favorite on-screen like puppet aliens. They're just they're a brilliant design. They are, so dim-witted, but like so the bureaucracy of it all is really good. But the other thing I think we talked about is readjusting this, where I think more quirkiness would have been, I don't know if it works, but like that more quirkiness would have been even more entertaining. Like I think you and I both agree that when you get the animations for every time you get something from the Hitchhiker's Guide and you have Stephen Fry talking, like it's brilliant. It's hilarious. It works really well. When we compared it to the TV show, the original TV show, and there were additional ones where you and I were both like, oh, I'd love to have seen them update this one. I'd like to have seen this one redone, and it's a shame we didn't get that. Because that's where I think, this, the great one in all of it is the sort of one of those famous ones is the whale versus the bowl of petunias. That like and you get the great Bill Bailey voicing the whale sort of as it falls. And he's going, "What is this? I should call this something grand, wind." And it gets all that until it dies, and then just get the voice of the other petunias to say, like, not again.
Oh no, not this again.
Yeah. And it's those little quirky moments where I'm like, oh, there's so many of those that are just I'd like to see a little bit more of that as well. Would really push us into that sort of really quirky sci-fi territory. But yeah, no, I do love this film.
I agree, and I think I love that bit too. And this is the version that I think of when I think of the petunias. But it's funny that we talked about sort of the sadness of thinking this is not going to get a sequel. This cast is so good.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that this movie exists. At the same time, it does sort of illustrate that point that we often make about money. And if you did this on a lower budget, now part of its charm is that it looks like a big budget American movie, right? But if you could, and especially with technical effects being cheaper today,
Mm.
if you could do this, on TV or on streaming or something, and you could do it today and it would look this good or better on a much smaller budget. I mean, budget kills everything.
Yeah.
And, when something is $100 million movie, it's got to make 300 million to break even. And putting that on Hitchhikers, um, do I want to live in a world in which Hitchhikers has the draw of a Harry Potter? Absolutely. That is, that it, that is, that is a world Leibniz would have approved of. Having said that, that may not be the world we're in.
Mm.
And if you can bring it in a little cheaper and guarantee those sequels and have it build and maybe then it builds its audience, right?
Mm.
So that over the course of a series, over the course of several sequels, people glom on and maybe it becomes Harry Potter in the long run or Pirates or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do think this was kind of set up to fail in a way.
I agree, and I do think I think we talked about it. Really, is this needs a streaming? This belongs on streaming. Do the first film, The Hitchhikers, as a 6 episode.
Mhm.
Redo it as a 6-7 episode series, and then each scene does a book. There's 5 seasons for you. And do it properly and maintain that quirkiness and stuff. I mean, people are calling out for quirkiness. If Umbrella Academy can get 3 or 4 seasons on Netflix, Doom Patrol is doing all right for whoever's doing that. You've had all these shows that have been a bit, yes, they're superhero focused and stuff, but you can do quirky sci-fi and all those things. People understand it now. I think now's the time to redo this and do it well.
I think the real comparison there is Good Omens on Amazon.
Yes, perfect.
And if you could take Good Omens, which has no commercial appeal whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
and jigger it around a little bit, but make it so. I mean, I had friends I had read that book when it came out, but I had friends coming to me and saying, "Oh, have you seen this Good Omens thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've got a first edition on my shelf." But I had friends coming to me who didn't know anything about this. If you could do that for Hitchhikers,
Yeah.
and that certainly is no more sellable than this.
Mm. No, I agree. I definitely think there's a version of this that could do that and do it well.
So here's the moment of truth, my brother. What's your rating?
I gave this a 7.
Oh wow. I gave it an 8.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I could be talked up, but it's
you were probably like, I can't come to Julian with, I'm the Brit in this equation. I can't be like, golly, Hitchhikers, no, I mean that. I think it's on par with Blade Runner and sort of the truly great sci-fi. I think you could show this to anybody, and I do think the world would be a better place with this.
Yeah, I think, and I would say that the messaging at the end, and everything, the ending of this is it has that sentimentality, but throughout, one of the things that I do like, it does maintain that there's a snark to it as well. There's a slight cynicism to it, and so not everything is, yes, there's a happy ending, but you've seen, for example, when you get the point of view gun. And you see Trillian firing at Zaphod, and you see her position and all this, and you do realize that she's been putting sort of like a brave face on it, but actually she is kind of, heartbroken by some of the things that's gone on. You get that, there's a happy ending, but there's still a bit of a bunch of misfits that it's never gonna be 100% between them.
Well, and that's the difference between this and something like Guardians of the Galaxy and the usual sort of like, golly, we're a band of misfits.
Mm.
You think about the worldview between this and Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Star Wars, literally, you have been ordained to run the universe by the Force, right? Like there is a forget divine right of kings, right? The universe vibrates with the energy of your destiny, right? Um, Hitchhikers, yes, it's pleasant at the end and there's this beautiful stuff, but there's no escaping. This is a meaningless universe in
Yeah.
which, yes, the human race gets to exist again, but humans are stupid and they screwed it up once and they'll screw it up again. And
Yeah.
there's no pretense otherwise.
Your world only exists at the behest of someone not rubber stamping a form. That's basically
Yes.
it. And I do kind of love that. And also, it's summed up. I mean, they even take the Mickey out of the Force, don't they? When what's it? Martin Freeman, Arthur Dent. He says, "Oh boy, I have a feeling that there's something bigger going on." And Bill Nighy's character sort of says, "Oh no, that's just straightforward paranoia. Everyone has that. Like no, there is
Everyone
no
in the universe feels
yeah,
that.
yeah. There is no force. There is no great thing. You're just paranoid, and everyone feels the same way. So stiff upper lip, carry on." So yeah, no, I do like this film. It's one I will revisit, and I wish pop culture would revisit as well, because I think it deserves it. Okay, so we're now going to enter your territory, really. We've gone from a film containing a sad, we've gone from a film containing a sad robot to a film containing multiple Michael Bay robots that are very happy to blow the crap out of everything.
Made of very shiny polygons with a lot of guns.
That's right.
I mean, interesting. That was
2007.
going to be the subtitles: polygons with guns. No, I mean I'm teasing, but I think this is a very good movie. And I mean, I think this first one, what stands out for me, and it's interesting that I was praising Bumblebee earlier, but what stands out for me about this first one is its sense of heart and the fact that like this is the best role Shia LaBeouf ever played. This is his quintessential role where he is a fantastic actor. And I mean, whether he's acting or he's just himself, I don't know, but he is stunning in this role. No movie, including the classic 80s movies, has sold a boy in his car and the romance of having a car and, being in high school and wanting a car and wanting to get the girl and all that goes on, as well as this. I mean, License to Drive wishes it was this. And I think it sells the whole sort of, aliens on Earth, their war, our world, better than, any War of the Worlds movie. So those are all, you combine that with live action Transformers, Starscream, flipping around as he's blowing things out of the sky, Blackout's introduction sequence, like those are two classic sequences in the history of action movies, and they're in the same movie. To me, this is a solidly good movie. That I don't know how great a Transformers movie it is, but it's certainly a great alien invasion movie with some human characters at its core. I could use a little less military stuff, but a little less conspiracy theory, stuff, but less piss jokes.
That was
even here.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, I agree. This is a solid film. I mean, I think very few films have got very few films or franchises have got such a good opening as this film. The first, 15, 20 minutes is like Blackout's attack on the airbase in Qatar or wherever it is a short film in and of itself. Like I can imagine that being like the test that they do to see if this works. It's really well done. It has everything you'd want. It makes the Transformers or the Decepticons feel like a legit threat. And it sets so much up. It's a really solid opening. One of the things I was thinking about as I again going through this list, I was thinking about things to talk about. You talk about the action in this film. one of the things that this film does that I realised how clever Michael Bay and clever is probably never not used that often. But one of the things I think this film does really well, that way, is it doesn't stick to one kind of action. It says, right, we are going to give you multiple different environments, and we're going to give you action each of them. Right, you're going to get an urban street chase. You are going to get robots killing each other in like a city and stuff, and you're going to get it in the desert, and you're going to get it sort of these other little bits going on. You're going to get Hoover Dam. Like, one of the things this does, it doesn't just stick to a single thing and then say we're doing this. Like, it takes you a lot of different places. It gives you a lot of different environments. And I just think it really, because of that, it feels like quite a big film. Like, it feels like a legit big film. And that's what I think adds to this sense of, you said, like, our world, their war. Like, it feels like a war. This isn't, you and I have said how we like films that are contained. It doesn't always have to be world-ending stakes. But in this, interstellar aliens or interstellar robot aliens coming to Earth to have a battle feels like it should have those stakes, and it should be earth-changing, and it does feel like that. And so I think I'd say that's a definite, a pro for this film. And I would say Shia LaBeouf, this is, I think, the film that made him. It's that sort of thing of like, this put him up there as often people refer to him as like the next Tom Hanks. Being able to be sort of like comedic but dramatic and doing all this other stuff. Not sure what happened to all that, but yeah, I don't know. This is a solid film. It introduces the franchise well. The characters work. There is some odd tonal moments in this. I think, as you say, sort of the whole introduction of Section 7 and John Turturro's character just is odd. Like, you've got these very serious military people, and then John Turturro walking around in a vest and boxers with a 7 on them, or in the shape of a Super 7. So he's almost like the Dennis Hopper of this film. Like, he appears to be doing something slightly different. And again, there's the whole scene where he's like, to a teenage girl saying that because she's a criminal, she's hot, which how that's never been edited out of this film baffles me. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is an awkward moment. I mean, I mean, the Transformers were great. I mean, I will also admit that the whole Allspark thing, which was invented here in Transformers lore, is stupid beyond belief. It was literally invented because they didn't want to use the Matrix of leadership, because the Matrix movies were known. So to avoid that name, they invented this thing that like both generates life spontaneously and also kills Megatron. Like, it will create life and also kill it and do whatever we need in any given circumstance, but feel really ominous. Like, it's bad. And, it's the MacGuffin. I mean, never has there been a MacGuffin more MacGuffin-esque than the Allspark.
Oh, no. The only time I will say that, but the thing is, I love the fact also that the Allspark is basically a very convenient box by the end of the film that can be carried around by multiple people. Like, it works wonderful. That bothers you, like, that this room-size thing is just like, right, we need to transport this. Let's have it turn into a Rubik's Cube. Oh, look at it! How convenient that is. That really weirds me out. That whole scene.
God, it's all done with polygons.
Yes, but like, shouldn't that be really densely masked? Should it like be not possible to pick up? But
that's true. Absolutely.
The only other film that does something similar to this is Mission Impossible 3, in which there is throughout the film it's called the Rabbit's Foot, and nothing about it. It is never confirmed what it is or what it does. It's just called the Rabbit's Foot, and the whole film centers around this thing. And it's a J.J. Abrams kind of thing, but it's the same thing. It's a MacGuffin for MacGuffin's sake. Like, that's not the point. Like, we realize it doesn't really matter. It's a football that they can toss from person to person and people can fight over. That's the point. but luckily the action that goes on around it is actually pretty good, and kind of brutal at times. I mean, the bit on the highway when
Oh God, yeah.
like Optimus Prime's like ripping their heads
Oh.
off. Yeah, like some of that
Well,
stuff's
and
really.
the other thing, I mean, that sense of war. I mean, this is so much of like when I think of the X-Men franchise, I think of superheroes. I
Mm,
mean, I think that Man of Steel kind of does it overly dark,
yeah,
but while also managing to make you convinced that somehow civilians didn't die. I mean, you don't really see that. This feels more convincing. But I think at least that's a step in the right direction in Man of Steel, right? Like acknowledging no, a world with superheroes in it is going to be incredibly violent and deadly. A world with Transformers in it is going to be incredibly violent and deadly. These are going to be horrific 9/11 style incidents happening every few episodes.
yeah,
Like if you're in the Transformers animated series, it's like there's a 9/11 every month. Um, these are that sense of trauma and that sequence with Brawl on the highway where he's just tearing through cars.
yeah,
And we've all been on the highway. We've all had moments of seeing something that we've got to break for and not being certain if we're going to survive or break okay, or if the guy next to us is going to let us in at a key moment. We can all identify with that. And seeing him just tear through civilians on the highway is really brutal. And again, same thing in the city, brings home the sense of,
mm,
yeah, no, this is a war. This is what we saw at the beginning on a military base in the middle of nowhere now has come to an American city. Um, and I feel that in
yeah.
this movie in a way that I don't in not just any Transformers stuff previously, but also a lot, even most superhero.
No, I agree. I do think that this is successful on a number of levels. It's one day we'll get into the rest of the franchise and maybe discuss, when they started to crank these out, if the speed is which sort of had caused the problem. But this one manages to balance heart with action in a lot of those scenes, and some of those, the battle scenes at the end are really good. I think there's um they maintain the notion that people have escaped. It's not, it's brutal, but not quite. Optimus Prime doesn't crash and land on a small family or anything like that. Like we're not seeing him peel someone off the back of his leg or stuff, but like, but you get that like people are in threat, like people are in danger. So no, I think it all works, and I think again, I think the characterizations are good. I think, like you said, we were reflecting back on the use of Megan Fox. Yes, she's slightly over sexualized, but the actual character is pretty self-sufficient. She's the one that she's proactive. She gets involved. She sort of gets on with it. She rides into battle on a number of occasions. Like she's not like a damsel in distress at any real point.
Right. Yeah, and there's that wonderful moment of the two of them coming together as they
Mm,
hold hands, and he says, don't you want to be able to say you got in that car?" Um, boy, this can sell, and it's that Spielberg thing. I mean, this can sell that movie magic in a way that, uh, you know, so I mean, Spielberg struggles to do these days sometimes.
yeah,
Um, but I do think, just as a final note, that it's interesting. We both hit on how like all the stuff that's bad with the rest of the movies is sort of has some kernel in here, you know. It's like it has all of the faults. It's like watching that general rise to power, and you're like, this guy's so efficient. He's the best soldier. Like he's going to be president someday. Like this is going to be amazing. It's like, yeah, he'll probably iron out these rough spots, and fast forward like every stage of his career, the rough spots just take over, right? All of the bad things about that personality just come out as he gains more power. that's basically the story of the Michael Bay
Yeah.
Transformers movies.
Yeah.
And it's painful to think about.
It will be
So
interesting. It would be interesting to sort of see some of those later ones. I mean, you know, we may not get to Last Night, and I've got no intention of watching that film again. But
I won't make you watch that movie.
but
I think it's fascinating.
when we talk about again, Anthony Hopkins being thrown around in that film compared to some of the stuff in this, it's an interesting journey. Okay,
well, let's
what did
just
you
say
score it?
Shia LaBeouf outperforms Anthony Hopkins. Like
Yeah,
that's a bad sign. All right.
yes, it is.
Um,
So what's your
I think
score
it's
then?
your turn.
Is it my
Your turn
turn?
to rate first.
Uh, I actually, because there are things I do have problems with this film, and I do think it sort of falters at times because of tone and things. I gave this a 6.5.
It's all good, man. I gave this a 7.
Mm.
So, 0.5 difference. I mean, I would, my heart tells me this is more like a 7.25, 7.5.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's all that like Allspark stuff, all that, all the like, yeah, criminals are hot.
yeah,
Like that's all that kind of stuff that, you know, it's like I could show this to anybody and be like, this is an amazing movie. You need to watch this. But it's got to be a 7 because there were those caveats where it's like, yeah, that you might not want your daughter to be in the room for that 30-second bit
yeah,
there. No.
yeah. No, I agree. I think that's sort of it. Okay, so we're
Time
gonna
crimes.
Time Crimes, same year, 2007.
Spanish.
Yeah, we took again back to Spanish cinema. So yeah, Time Crimes. I was it. There's been a few films. I've either found them on streaming, I've been lucky, or I've already had them. I've already owned them, but we've done them. But there's been a couple where I've had to buy them. And I've bought them. I've picked them up on DVD or Blu-ray relatively cheaply and stuff for us to watch. And then I think, yeah, I'll drop that in there for a car boot or jumble sale or whatever. Time Crimes is one where I picked it up relatively cheaply, not really knowing what it was. Went in and it still sits on my shelf because I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go back to this. Like, not regular because I don't think that it would work in that way. It's not like a Transformers where there's entertainment value, but there's something here. But I really enjoy Time Crimes, and I know there are problems with the way the film plays out, but I like the fact that this film really tries, and I do think you can sit and pass this film out. I think this may be my primer.
Well, I think that's the comparison, and I think for me, I guess I saw Primer earlier. I still think Primer is the better of the two, substantially. Both have problems though, and certainly they're both admirable in what they're attempting to do, right? I think the problem with Primer is that it like omits scenes and omits so much that like core connective tissue is missing. That's not the problem here. The problem here is it's got all that connective tissue. It goes out of its way to show like, oh, okay, I'm going to put on the bandage now. It just isn't always motivated. It doesn't always make sense,
Yes.
I live down the street from the Temporal Institute, in the middle of the woods. I mean, because that's where we could shoot. I mean, so that and I guess maybe the question is, and both of them deserve immense respect for doing time travel, smart sci-fi on zero budget, and making really good movies. And I guess the question then becomes like, what bothers you more? Does it bother you that like I think the highs of Primer are higher, but the errors or the problems are more basic and key? The problems with Time Crimes are more like motivation, they're less like continuity, key, storytelling thing.
I think the thing I have more problems with Primer. I'd like to go back to it one day and revisit. I think I have more problems with Primer because of those connective tissue items. That sort of it feels like it's omitting something to make it work. but this is the opposite. This is almost like it introduces things to make it work, and I say it takes kind of leaps. And I think obviously we discussed this when we covered it on the show, was this idea of like, well, why does he have to do that? Like he realizes that it's predetermined, like this cycle happens, and so the moment of him. One of the moments I really enjoy in this film is that moment of him turning around with the hands up binoculars, because he knows that he's going to come across this character to do that. And it's only on the fifth attempt of him doing it that it actually sort of comes to pass, that it's exactly what his other self saw. So I like that bit, but then, like you say, the putting on of the bandages, the attack on the woman in the woods, making her do, like it feels
Really
like
weird.
it feels weird, yeah. Because then it's like, okay, why did it have to happen? Like, why has this been put in the story? Why has this been put in the film? Because there could have been something else. It could have been more accidental that would have happened. That would have then triggered him to realize, oh, I can't escape this, and then like, so there's that whole the thing around that, the whole him attacking the woman, making her undress, and then him stabbing himself with the scissors and stuff. Sort of like that whole section is part where I have the most problem with. But then there's other bits when it's sort of like he's clearly going crazy, like he's spiraling as he gets through all this. I kind of like some of the rest stuff as he gets more aggro and he gets more sort of like, each version of himself is getting more and more sort of like dangerous and sort of having to do things. And then the twists towards the end with him and his wife and some of the other things, and then that ending of them sat and he grabs her and sort of makes her sit down and stuff. I still think about that. Like I'm still like, what happens beyond that? Like I don't know, but like I like how this film sort of makes me think about it. So yeah, all those things, although I recognize them as being narrative problems to make things happen, it still generally works for me.
Yeah, I think that I come back to that issue of motivation, and I agree with you about what's weak and what's working. I like the wife stuff overall. There's a lot that's smart and good here. For me, it's this issue of motivation, and it's funny because I'm usually the guy who argues for determinism, and I still do. But determinism doesn't mean that yes, I might have to do acts to fulfill the determinism, but I can be uncertain about it. You can give me a motivation. I can realize, maybe I'm suddenly filled with rage for this person, right? We have those moments. It just seems to me like he, to have him, it's not just that the movie doesn't need to have that nudity and that sexual assault.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But it also, he doesn't seem like a guy who would do that. And he doesn't seem bothered as he's doing it. He's not like, I'm sorry I have to do this. He's like suddenly becomes a guy who's sexually assaulting somebody, and he doesn't seem like he's enjoying it. Like he seems really pathological. I just don't know how to understand any of that.
No, I agree. There's a leap early in this film when he seems to make an assumption or that everything is deterministic and he has to fulfill those roles. And I think the gap is, firstly, I think, as I said, I think more needs to be accidental. That determinism needs to be like it's fulfilled later in the film, like the crash against the dumpster and finding the coat and all that sort of stuff. It's sort of, but putting the coat on, that trashy coat, it's like, well, why? Oh, because the character because it's already happened. I've already seen that this happens. But he's like, okay, well, he needs to almost have that argument with himself internally of like, well, why do I put this on? Well, I've already seen that this happens, so it has to happen. So if it has to happen, then there has to be a reason for it to happen. Well, I should then put it on. It doesn't have to make a great sense, but he almost has to argue himself into it, I suppose. And we don't get that. He just sort of does it through a lot of this.
Yeah. And even editing could help that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, when he puts on the bandages, Like, and there's a moment of where he sort of seems to realize. I mean, we're imagining because we don't have any narration or anything,
Mm.
but where he seems to realize, oh, okay, now I'm that guy
Yeah.
who I saw with the bandages on. And instead of sort of pausing and being shocked by this, he sort of pauses for a couple seconds and then it's like, oh, right, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. I guess I'm a rapist now, like,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's in for a penny, in for a pound. Oh, well, Yeah. He doesn't even try to. There's no attempt to try and break away from the determinism. That's the problem. There's no thing where he's like, you often see it in these films where they're like, no, I'm not held by the whims of the universe. I can do whatever I want. And in them trying to prove that they can do whatever they want, they then fulfill the deterministic future. But that doesn't happen. And I think that's sort of the thing that's missing is him, being shocked that he is trapped in this cycle and then sort of giving in. I think that's the thing. It's sort of like, I almost want to see him giving in more of like, right, well, I can't escape this, so I might as well just go with it. As you say, in for a penny, in for a pound. But like, that almost needs to be like a breaking moment for him where he's like, well, I can't escape this. It is what it is. Don't know. Yeah.
well, I gave this a 7.
Oh, so did I.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm glad to see this. I will watch this again.
Mm.
I did enjoy it, but I'm glad we're on the same page. Actually,
Yeah, no, it's a good film. I'm gonna go back and watch this. I think it's got a lot to recommend it. Okay, from Spain to Japan, 2008 Tokyo Gore Police, low budget, whatever.
Whatever.
Not yeah, everything. I was going to try and categorize this, but this is a really sort of like in for a penny, in for a pound kind of movie. Yeah, this is an action horror gore fest that I don't know. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how little I remember it. Like I think that it had a lot more charm for me at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, obviously I'm the battle royale guy. I'm charmed by violence and, excessive violence. Tie it with a little something. This doesn't really tie it with anything, but there were a lot of scenes that I would just thought, I've never seen anything like this. Like, this is so charming and over the top. And all of them have kind of faded from memory a bit. What about you? You
No,
were kind of less charmed in the first place.
yeah, I think one of the things of this film is I think you've hit the nail on the head. There is some really good stuff in this that sort of there's ideas, and I think when they go to the club and there's that sort of like transhumanism, and they've got the people that have got the woman with the eyes on the stalks, and there's all those other little bits and pieces going on. That's fascinating. Like that whole scene is really good. And oh wow, this is going to go somewhere. This is fascinating. And then it leads into the guy, the undercover policeman, being attacked by the woman who's been cut in half, and all of a sudden her lower half becomes like a mouth, and you're like, that's crazy. And like that
Or
whole
like
section,
alligator,
yeah,
Yeah, that's the best part. Yeah.
that bit's all really cool. Can't tell you what was going on though. No idea. There's, this is it. I remember that there's, the heart of this. There's a female police officer, and she is part of this squad, and she's out to avenge the death of her father. There's this whole conspiracy and stuff, but it never really matters or means anything. And I think this is the thing you said. The gore, even comparing this to, like say, Battle Royale. Like with Battle Royale, yes, I was saying there's a lot of set pieces and it goes from one to the other, it rushes through maybe. But with that, there's still at least a little bit of heart where I'm going, okay, I want to get to the end. Like, I care and I enjoy the opening scene. And, there's that little bit. But with this, I'm really struggling to remember, like you say, what was going on, what it meant. There's a scene I remember where a guy's got like a gigantic, like, shooting penis, that like gore.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but again,
Except that he's assaulting the police station, which is clearly a floor of a parking garage.
Yeah, yeah,
I
but
mean,
like it's got surrealism, but like it doesn't. But it's not like leaning in. It's got surrealism, but like I don't
what's
know
the
whether.
plot?
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know whether it
What's it
wants you
about?
to. I don't know whether it wants you to be charmed or find that the surrealism is funny. Like there is a scene
Yeah.
where the guy's desk is in the middle of a parking garage, and you're like, is that supposed to be funny? Is it
No,
supposed to be so quirky? I don't understand
I don't
this.
think so. Um, no, I mean, even from the beginning, when you're introduced to this flashback to her father being shot, it's so hokey.
Yeah,
Like, he's talking, and then you sort of like, it's done in just the most stereotypical low budget hokey way, and then you keep like zooming out and seeing other perspectives on this same hokey event
yeah,
that don't improve the quality of the image in any way. I mean, it's like, by the way, there was an alien standing next to him on stage. Wouldn't that have been relevant to
yeah,
tell us earlier? Like, how, I mean, it's unfathomable in that way. And I think that, those over the top, it's easy to kind of forgive that stuff and be entertained by the over the top elements. And I was entertained watching this, especially once I got into it. Um, but at the end of the day, I remember the bad stuff more than I do the good.
yeah. That's sort of the problem. I mean, the big key problem for me is some of the bad. Like when this all sort of wraps up, and like she becomes one of these things. So they've got like a weird fleshy key in them. Like they're going for some Cronenbergian thing, and she ends up with one inside them, and she's got like her arm turns into something or other. Like she avenges everything and does everything, but then the main villain reappears right at the end, and they walk off. And I'm like, I did not get it, and I was like, okay, this doesn't feel like it went anywhere. It feels like a bunch of funny ideas that they've like a bunch of bros have gone, oh man, this would be cool. It didn't work for me.
And that Cronenbergian key thing, like, there's a lot of sort of body horror and images like that are very, Cronenbergian, can stand up with his stuff. And let's be clear, like Videodrome, as we discussed, I think it's a masterpiece, but it doesn't make sense either on some key levels, so to speak. Having said that, this sort of takes that as a license to abuse the concept of narrative in a way that is very different from Cronenberg. And it has a set of stuff, whether it's the imagery, ideas, mostly imagery, that I think is top-notch, amazing, fun. But it really doesn't know how to have consistent characters. Even the main character just is totally shallow. It doesn't seem to understand how a plot works. And those things, are forgivable if you're watching a movie drunk in the theater with your buddies eating red vines. It's less forgivable, thinking about it as an actual movie for a podcast.
Yeah. One of the things I think about a lot as we go through these films is rewatchability. If I was to rewatch this, what would I take from it on a second or third viewing? Like, why am I going back into it? Like, going back into like The Running Man is because I like those Arnie films of the 80s. Like they're entertaining, it's silly, it's fun. And then, Dark City, like I get something from that film, and so on and so forth. The thing with Tokyo Gore Police is like I think it's like a one-shot deal. Like once you've watched it once and it's sort of shocked you, you can sort of go, oh, okay. Like there's no need to go back for it. Like it's not going to be as shocking the second time, but you're not going to get anything from the plot. None of the characters are fun. Like there's nothing else beyond that initial shock value or something that will pulls you back in for me.
For me, I would say slightly better. I would say it reminds me of sort of how I feel about David Lynch movies, which is that most David Lynch movies, I think, there's a brilliant 20 minutes in here. I mean, I think Tokyo Gore Police probably has a brilliant 30 minutes. But I really want to watch that edited 20 minutes or 30
Yeah.
minutes. I don't want to watch the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie, in many cases, whether it's David Lynch or this, has nothing to do with that 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That could be a total digression, or just a dream sequence, or just like the characters wander into a theater and suddenly there's a postmodern play being put on. Like, why the fuck not? Because it's David Lynch, right? I mean, Tokyo Gore Police is like that, where I would much prefer my personal 30-minute just edit of like, here's your crazy short film that eschews narrative logic completely, than I would the rest of the film. The
Here's
rest of
your
the film actually drags that 30 minutes.
exactly. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, here's your crazy 30-minute Power Rangers episode. Like, everything else can
I
be
wish
dropped.
Power Rangers were involved prostitutes with
Yeah.
vaginas that were made of alligator faces. I mean, but okay, right.
Well, that was
that
all.
would be a
That
Power
was
Rangers that I want.
yeah. That was edited out for the American market. But go back to the original. You'll be surprised. Okay.
That Red Ranger had a gory Cronenbergian penis that did all of his work for him.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah, the Zoids they brought back was crazy. Okay, your turn then. What do you score Tokyo Gore Police?
I gave this a 5.5.
Oh, okay. I gave this a 4.
Okay.
A 4, yeah. Yeah, I really struggle with this one. Right.
This next one is interesting too.
Yeah. Staying in
Another
the realm
foreign.
staying in the realm of visceral, I'm gonna say nonsensical films. 2013's Hard to Be a God.
I wouldn't say this is nonsensical. I would just say it's not interested in telling you the plot. Whereas like Tokyo Gore Police does not make sense.
Yes. All right. Fair. That's
This one makes sense. It just has no interest in conveying A happened before B, and you should know what A and B are.
Yeah. Well, this is because this is a plot. There's an A, B, C, D. This film gives you C and D, and then well, it gives you gives you B and D, and he's going to drop C from part of the plot and not even tell you what A is. So you have to sort of like hold it all together. Yeah, this one is interesting for me, because we got back to this. We've touched on this thing about art and what these films should be. I mean, this film got, as I've mentioned several times, got a visceral reaction from me. I couldn't sit through this film without taking a break. Like, I literally had to be like, I'm walking away. This is a 3-hour film that I can't do in one sitting. It's beautifully made. It's incredibly technically well made. I can't fault the skill and the dedication and the commitment that was put into constructing this film. However, like, it also, I don't know, it's just, well, I'll get to my point, but yeah, that's my pros for this film. I think it is wonderfully well made. I think the commitment to the scope of the film, of like, we said that everything that's going on in the background, the size of all the extras, and the set work is incredible, absolutely incredible. But I'm going to leave it to you for now, so then I'll get back to some of the points.
Well, I mean, it's hard, right? Because it depends, like, what are you going to a movie to see, and how do you judge that movie? And we've had these discussions. Like, do you judge it based on what it wants to be? How do you judge a work of art? It's certainly not fair to judge it based on what we want it to be. I think that it achieves what it sets out to achieve remarkably well. There are indications. I mean, look, it's visceral. It's going to stick with both of us. And I think, unlike Tokyo Gore Police, where what sticks with us are more the embarrassing stuff, what sticks with us are powerful moments with Hard to Be a God that are brilliantly shot, and upsetting.
Yeah.
But in a good way, in a way that powerful movies can upset you. So that's very good, but there are signs that it wants to be a little clearer than it really is, right? It opens with a narration, with a scroll and whatever. I mean, okay, well, none of that, all of that sort of dropped, and it is very hard to follow. I think if you say it gives you A in a capsule poorly translated summary on screen, and it gives you the narration at the beginning, like they came from this other planet, right? Then B is completely dropped and not shown and never referred to. C is sort of shown from a character's point of view, so you have no idea what is really going on or what came before or after or what that character's bias is. D is, sort of, skipped again or something, and E is shown in full, and it's majestic to look at, but I'm missing puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of missing puzzle pieces is key to the experience of this movie and its frustration for both of us.
Yeah. This film, one of the things that's been interesting about this is I would say, journey with the hard to be a god. Okay. I've now ordered the novel. I read like a 10-page sample of it, and I was like, actually, this is kind of cool. I'm going to read this. So I've ordered it. We've watched the 1989/1990 version, the German language version, and we both really like that. For our full discussion, check out the Patreon. But that's a much more standard structured film. It lays out things a lot clearer. And the thing we both said is that actually watching that made things in this version much clearer. And that you go, oh, that's what that means. That's why that's happening, and that's that sort of thing. So there's little bits that I was like, okay. But the thing that sort of has stuck with me is the emotional resonance we both got from the sort of the early version, the first version, the 1989 version, with regard to what it meant, and also the ending. What the ending meant in the original version. I don't want to go over it because it's obviously on the Patreon, but what happens in the end is much more laid out. It feels earned. It's sort of, it's still got there's an ambiguity. There's still some sort of like oddness to it. It's all still very odd, but it works. Here, like there's a whole, like you said, there's a whole chunk where I'm like, hang on, what happens? What happened to this whole thing about atheism versus sort of like the worshipping of deities and interventionism and these sort of things have been resolved, sort of don't really coalesce enough for me. But taking this as a journey through Akinar as a place, and having to sort of go from this sterile future, this sort of as a scientist, and then live in this maddening medieval place. This works, but it just doesn't work as a whole, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and I think partly what's so frustrating comparing the two versions is that 1989 one is poorly shot compared to this.
Oh yeah,
poorly staged. I mean, is a low budget. I mean, if you watch both of them with the sound off, right, you would say this version is a masterpiece. Like this is a European tour de force. And you'd say that 1989 one is like a crummy 80s sci-fi movie, right?
It looks like a music video. It looks like an 80s music video in parts. Like it's not, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. But with the sound on, these are totally different experiences. And I think, I mean, the next movie we're going to talk about is Blade Runner. Imagine if Blade Runner were shot as Harrison Ford just on the streets of a futuristic Japanese influenced city, right? With neon and all, and you're just totally immersed. You're told at the beginning, you've got the same introduction about like these are Blade Runners, in that stupid beginning, frankly, just as stupid. But instead of seeing him ever interact with the police or anything, you just see him on the street. And you're like, I guess he's one of those Blade Runners from the beginning. And then he encounters, a woman who dances with a snake and winds up shooting her on the street. And you're like, I guess he killed her because she's a android. I don't really know. And that's the end of the movie. And you're like, or he gets Rutger Hauer, and they have a fight or something.
Well, no. The comparison would be like he does that. He probably kills the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of it, it would cut away. They would meet. It would cut away, and then it'd come back to Rutger Hauer having shut down, and Harrison Ford just stood there, being upset about it. And you'd be like, "Hang on, I appear to have missed an entire scene."
Well, yeah, and in some ways, like this description of Blade Runner sounds like a fascinating movie, right? But also potentially problematic as a viewer. And I think that, yeah, that's fascinating. It's ambitious. There's something to immersing your audience in this sci-fi world, but there's also something to letting the audience know the plot and also having the contrast between that futuristic world. I mean, even just having like the base that they've set up on the planet where they can go to, and suddenly you're in a world with computers and cleanliness and all of this, where you have that contrast instead of this unrelenting, merciless grime and filth that makes you forget. It's like, I guess they're aliens. There's nothing visual to ever tell you that.
No.
Except for some differences between this world and our own that they're on. But there's nothing really visual to tell you, yes, they're actually from a different world than this. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a time travel story rather than a space exploration story. But the other version couldn't. Like, the other version is set up to be much more a different planet. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. The one thing you said that I need to resolve in my own head is this thing of like, can I meet it on its own terms, or do I review it on my terms? As I'm going through and considering this film, aligned to this, because you're right. If I was to say, oh yeah, this film set out to be something, a 3-hour visceral visual tour de force of this medieval landscape. Yeah, it's an 8, it's a 9. Like, it works. That's exactly what it is. Does it work as something you can go back and say, this is hard to be a god? This is the story that was laid out in that novel. This is the story that sort of like this trying to tell. No, it really doesn't for me. Like, it's not. I'm. It's one of those things. I'm so glad. I joked. I always joke to you about Solaris. This is the new Solaris, by the way. But
you're like, I softened on Solaris.
I have, but that's the thing. I have, because I still think of that film and how, yes, it had long stretches that did that I was first, but that film still had something to offer. It's got some ideas. It's got great set pieces and some moments. There's other bits I don't quite get still, but that film offered me something to reflect on and a narrative about that was in there. It's all in there. You can take it from the film. Mm-hmm. This is not that.
You're right. And I was re-listening to the Solaris episode recently, which was our second episode ever. And we talked about the difference between the early stuff on Earth, which Tarkovsky had filmed more of and was much more focused on, versus the stuff on the station. And we both said, like, the transition is clumsy between those, but I defended the stuff on Earth and why it's there and why it needs to be there, but admitted, like, it's at least twice as long as it needs to be. And both of us said, like, basically once you're on the space station, it moves forward.
Yeah.
Hard to be a god takes longer to get anywhere, and when it does get somewhere, it's still sort of like, I still don't know what's going on. I'm still sort of like, I kind of have a gist of it, but
Well, it takes
It's not.
away the biggest problem I have with this film. Now I understand what the plot is, or the plot, the general stories of the whole concept is that you have these grey people, the grey sort of like these religious fanatics that are sort of killing off all form of intellectualism. They're sort of call it killing off, and if you can write and if you can do anything, you're creative, a scientist, you're in danger. And this is building up to an army of these people coming to Akana. That's the whole. The crux of this film is
And a massacre.
a massacre is about to happen, and does our
Right.
protagonist, who's going around this town, intervene? Like he is
Right.
in a position where he could intervene. Well, the fact is, like, that intervention eventually that choice comes to fruition as to something should happen. This film version doesn't show you that, doesn't want to show you how that choice is made. It literally jumps to the aftermath of that choice, and then we get a kid picking out, basically ripping off dead bodies. And again, you're like, okay, this is a fascinating thing. The head that's floating in that puddle as they sort of step over it, and the grimness and the reality of what a medieval battle would look like. Very good. But I'm still going, who the hell killed all these people? And then you meet your main protagonist. He's sat around in a puddle, and someone has a go at him, and you're like, I don't understand. Why is this person angry with him? Did he do this? I assume that's what's being said.
It is hard to tell the characters apart and the different factions apart, and to know if it matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you ultimately rate this? I mean,
4.
you said on its own terms it's an 8 or a 9. No, you gave this a 4?
I give it a 4. I couldn't.
Wow.
I really struggle with this. Where I was like, I'm sorry. It's just, as you said, if I meet it its own terms, on a technical standpoint, and I would give that 4. It's mostly for its technical capabilities, and I think and also the story behind the scenes of how the guy who was really pushing for this obviously passed, and his sons and stuff, and it carried on, completed the editing and everything. So it was to be completed. Is a good story, but yeah, I would rather watch that shaky version from 8. Much prefer to watch that shaky version from 89. What did you give it? Is this going to be our bit?
I gave it a 6.25.
Okay.
So,
it's still not quite Battle Royale, but
no, but quite a bit of difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I mean, of the foreign stuff, I think I'm rating higher.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a bias on my part or
Yeah, it could be a bias. I think it's more of a bias on my part, really, going in. But the thing is, I think I would have rated this higher if I hadn't learned more about the source material and alternate versions.
I think I was able to rate it that high because I knew a little bit about the source material and the different versions. So for me, like, I kind of have the confidence that if I watched this movie again, more and more of that stuff is in that movie. And going in and kind of knowing a little bit, I was able to say, oh, okay, there's a line that's the line that establishes that.
Yeah.
I think it would benefit from multiple viewings. It would never wind up being the movie that you and I want it to be,
No.
but it would benefit from multiple viewings, and a lot of that confusion would clear up. It's just that it wants you to pick up those little scraps of hint at the plot that is on the surface and obvious in the 89.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, that's like, okay, it is kind of cinematically a masterpiece. It is an amazing feat of cinema. It has struggles with narrative, but I do kind of grade it as if those pieces are kind of there. And maybe if I watched it 5 more times, it would either go up because I'd say, no, actually, Scott, all that stuff is there, and it's really clear to me that it's there. You just have to watch it 5 times to kind of see it all. or it would kind of go down, and I would say, yeah, that stuff really isn't there, and basically, your first impression is right because there's no way you could ever pick this stuff.
Yeah. I'm not watching it 5 times. Yeah. You might be right.
Fuck you.
One thing I would say is though, if we go to the Patreon to find out more of this discussion about the 89 version, but one of the things that is hard, if you were to take some of the viscerality of this film, especially around the torture element, the Tower of Joy, and put it into the other one, like that elevates that other film, like, quite a bit. That put that film up a couple more notches.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, it is flabbergasting to me. One of the things that's most flabbergasting, I understand you don't want to say, I'm from Earth, I'm from an alien planet, right? And you don't want to show that, and you want to like immerse people in that. Okay, that is a creative choice. I totally understand. That's fine. That's one thing. I don't understand why you can't say and have the characters say, this guy invented a printing press.
Yeah.
This guy is the genius of our age. You're murdering, the smartest people we've got, right? That's kind of implicit in this version, but it would be so easy. Even in you're not breaking,
No.
you're hiding in the society by saying that, right? And a little bit of that would have gone a long way here.
I agree. 100%, yeah. So a mix of the two, you get the perfect version.
So Blade Runner 2049.
2049, yeah. 2017, Denis Villeneuve.
We both like this at the end.
Yeah, let's wrap that up. We're both big fans of this. No, I love this film. I think I honestly do. I think this is visually stunning. I think the cast are all really good. I think there are sort of faults with the central mystery. It's sort of all a bit too coincidental that Kay's memories just happen to be the ones of this replicant-born child and all that kind of thing. It's a little bit too neat in that way. But I do like the way it rolls out. I do like the fact it's slow and it works at its own pace. So I do like the fact that it's not rushing to give you all the cameos that you're meant to get for this kind of thing and that. So, if anything, what rewatching this has sent me off into a bit of a Blade Runner rabbit hole to read all the other additional material. So, yeah. What about yourself?
And stay tuned for our 8-episode, I think 10-episode recap of Black Lotus, where we spent 15 minutes an episode, right?
Yeah, that I couldn't get through episode 2. Not because it's a bad story, but the animation on that I'm gonna have to try again. I was trying to watch it through my laptop, and I might have to try again. But yeah,
I think Blade Runner 2049. I mean, certainly trounces Empire Strikes Back as in contention for best sequel ever made. And I think that we had done Blade Runner before on the podcast in the first season. And let me look. We both gave it an 8. I think that obviously like Blade Runner had tremendous influence, but I have a lot of criticism of that movie. And think that there are core problems with that movie that are kind of overlooked. And Villeneuve, first of all hail Villeneuve. Villeneuve is great. Villeneuve could, shoot a bottle of Downy detergent and it would look like, the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. He is just somehow able to do that and to immerse you in these worlds and these landscapes, even more than like Chris Nolan can. And Chris Nolan's great at unrolling these futures, these weird environments, and getting you to believe them. But Villeneuve just puts you in them.
Yeah.
In a way that is amazing. And I think there are so many scenes. There are so many from that dead tree at the beginning, and this box of bones, to the baseline test, which I don't totally understand, to, the AI girlfriend, to the Vegas stuff and those shattered, giant female statues, um, to Robin Wright. There's so much here that sticks with you and lingers in the memory, as much or more than the original Blade Runner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is one of those films that, again, I think this will follow a similar path to the original Blade Runner. Like, this didn't make it. It's considered a flop, on the big screen. Didn't make all the money they thought it was going to do, but because it's not, that Marvel pacing, it's not the film I think some people were expecting. But then Blade Runner isn't. I think Blade Runner has been held up as this film, and when people go back, they're like, oh no, it's actually quite a introverted and quite a sort of slow paced film. It's a detective story more than anything. It's got some, as you say, some problems. This film, to me, just is, we talk about comparing this to Hard to Be a God, about what cinema can be, but what sci-fi can be. There are problems in this film. I do have some sort of quibbles and stuff, but again, when you you take it on and you're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it look beautiful, and I'm actually going to give you a story where you're going to have a think about it, and we're going to give you some symbolism, and I think Villeneuve does this exceptionally well. I mean, Dune and Arrival and everything are, I would say, on par with this. It elevates not just the film, but it's quite clear that, like you say, the cast get it as well, and they're elevating to it. When I remember when this came out and thinking, oh, Ryan Gosling, okay, he's trying to do this thing of, there's Drive and Beyond the Pines and all these other films that he'd done, and I'm just like, yeah, all right, but he's still trying to shake off the Mickey Mouse Club kind of image from his youth. What's this going to be? But he's brilliant. I think he's absolutely fantastic in this film. It's clear that even like Harrison Ford, and I will say this with confidence, Harrison Ford turned up to the set of Star Wars Force Awakens and was like, yeah, I'm going to be Han Solo again, and I'll do this. Turns up to this and he gives it some. Like, this clearly feels way much more like a project he has passion for than some others, especially at this age. And you mentioned like Robin Wright, who's great in this, and Ana de Armas. Like, there's just, like you said, there's a scene in this film where a holographic AI character is killed off, and it hurts. Like, it actually, you're like, oh fuck, like, and it's done well, and I just, there's just so much about this film that's so wonderful.
I think that sequence where he finds the horse, where he remembers it. I remember watching that in theaters and just being devastated, having that hit me, and feeling like I'd been kicked at the chest. And especially having seen, we talked earlier about sort of, with Dark City, is sort of like the Matrix effect of sort of like pulling the rug out from under you. We've seen that now for 20 years, 25 years as like a basic aspect of cinema, and especially sci-fi. Here we have that, and it's emotionally effective. And I think here again, not to knock Chris Nolan, I love Chris Nolan. We should do every Chris Nolan sci-fi film. But Nolan sometimes gets pegged for being emotionless.
Yeah.
And
cold.
And Villeneuve could never be pegged for that. This manages, the reason why that's so effective is it takes an abstract, everything you know is wrong, kind of who am I moment, and grounds it, just pounds it into you emotionally, right down to the symbol for what becomes the emblem for that realization, which is a child's toy. Cast away in the ash. What could be more symbolic?
But what makes that even more impactful, because I love that scene, and again, Gosling plays it really well. Is the fact that it has things like the musical swell, and these are the moments and stuff that go with it. And I love the fact that it's followed up with his AI girlfriend saying, "Look, I told you were special. Like, she's always been there. There is something more to you." And it throws you in the audience. You are Kay at this moment. You're thrown off. But then you spend the rest of the film learning the truth. And so it's like, yes, I'm going to give you this emotional impact, and then I'm going to give you more. Like, I'm going to drag you over the coals with it as well. And it's kind of hard, because for Kay, like, he believes there's this thing, and then it slowly gets taken away from him as the realization sets in throughout the other information. And this is my interpretation. I know we had sort of a bit of a questioning about it, but like, I like the fact that it does that. Like, it's not going to be this. The world of Blade Runner is not sunshine and rainbows. It's not a happy ending for everyone, and that's why I like this. It's honest in itself, in that sort of
Well,
way.
the other thing that I think about is, you said the board of Blade Runner is in Sunshine and Roses. I mean, the protagonist dies at the end on the
Yeah.
stairs. And we have so few examples in American cinema of characters who are victorious but die anyway, right? I mean, we love the happily ever after, and American endings are the good guys win, and it's sanitized, and if there were sacrifices along the way, they were noble sacrifices, and this is a sort of noble sacrifice, but it's a noble sacrifice that means something to him and one other person, maybe two. It's so small, and yet, it's this like personal victory. Like, yes, maybe I'm an android, but my life meant something. Maybe I'm a replicant, but I did this thing. And I can die feeling like I didn't just fulfill my programming. I was my true self, and I helped somebody today. And that's a victory, but it's not the kind of Hollywood victory that we're trained to expect.
No, we often get these endings with revenge films. This is the ending of the revenge film. This is Gladiator. This is I'm trying to think, the Dead Man's Shoes, not to spoil any endings, but this idea of like, I have taken my revenge and I can now die and join my family or whatever. Like, there's that sort of thing. This is the ending that Frank Castle should always have had a long time ago. But to do this for a positive, not to have taken revenge, but to have sort of like resolved the conspiracy, to resolve the mystery, I do, and I just think it's such a sort of, they hang on a moment at the end. Obviously, Harrison Ford goes into the building, and Deckard goes in and puts his hand on the window, and we've sort of said there's a question that comes after that, which is like, who are you? But it doesn't. That's not the point, because then it goes out, and you do have that resolution for Kay when he's like, as you say, I've done the right thing, and it changes this idea of this weird question of what it is to be human. There was all this question of, is Deckard a replicant or a human? Doesn't matter. We know that Kay is a replicant. It's pretty much confirmed. It's pretty much confirmed. But it's more about the human condition. Like, he didn't have to do this thing. He didn't have to sacrifice himself for this, but he chose to because it was the right thing to do. Which, replicant or not, is irrelevant at that point. He's done the human thing, which is why I love the ending. Yeah, this is a great film.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that another thing that I want to point out is it has such a French sort of love of beauty for its own sake. And when the AI advertisement that reminds him of Joy, right, another version of Joy, sort of tries to seduce him on that walkway, we don't need that for this movie. I mean, like, the only thing that's doing is saying, oh yeah, remember who Joy was, right? And like that's not my Joy. I can't replace her. I mean, we can feel all kinds of things about that moment. None of them are said.
Mm.
All of those feelings that we have about that moment and about Joy's death are implied. They're in us
Yeah.
as we're forced to confront a sort of generic joy, a sort of joy before she's customized and
Hmm.
gets to know him. And that's not a controlled scene. In other words, like the movie doesn't tell you what to feel about that. It doesn't tell you, see, she's just a program after all. It doesn't tell you, um, how to feel there. It doesn't tell you, see, Joy was so special because here's the generic unformatted version. You can take it either way.
Mm.
But that kind of moment is going to happen in a world that has these things. And so but it's this scene that's grounded in the visual, this stunning visual. And I remember it in theaters thinking, why are we taking time for this? This is so staggering. And it's so visually beautiful. And we don't need it.
No.
It does not serve a narrative purpose. And if it does serve a narrative purpose, it's one of letting you as the audience decide how you feel about it. It's just this kind of thing would happen in a world with AIs,
Mm.
right? AI girls being sold to people, right? This moment too would happen. How you feel about it is left to you. But what we get to do as filmmakers, if we're not going to tell you what to feel about it, is to display that moment in the most entertaining, aesthetically appealing, stunning way possible.
Mm.
And I think that is so brave beyond imagining.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that scene is a really good pinpoint for that film because it does it on several occasions where it will linger on a shot or it will linger on a sort of like a scene. We've talked about this. A similar thing is sort of Robin Wright's Office and the way sort of like you have sort of like the environments of this, but there's a shot through the window and you see the sort of the wider world and the the sterility inside. But it does it again like when it goes back to you said the dead tree and that sort of like that farm and stuff. Like it hangs on a scene of just saying, here's this barren landscape, and it's there for like several seconds. Doesn't need to be. It could just cut straight from it, but they linger on it. And I think that's what this film does so well is give you those visuals and able to enjoy them because it knows it's a part of it, and you get to enjoy the world. Anyway, we do.
What did you rate it? I've got a few comments about my rating. So what did you rate it?
I actually did. I gave this an 8.
I gave it an A2.
Mm.
But we both gave Blade Runner an 8.
Mm.
I feel as if I probably would rate Blade Runner like closer to a 7.5, except for its influence. And it's
Yeah.
hard for me to go back to Blade Runner and say, like, yeah, we've seen all this Japanese stuff, later, like, yeah, I've got these complaints about the plot, I mean, it's so profoundly influential that I give it a little point for that. I think Blade Runner 2049 is a better movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's better made. I think it's better paced. I
Mm-hmm.
think it tells its story better. I think it's more obviously resonant in its themes. Having said that, actually, in our talking about it, it's sort of the problems with it came to bother me a little more. And I don't know whether those problems won't bother me more in years to come.
For Blade Runner, the first one.
2049.
Oh, okay.
So with the first one, I sort of feel like I give it kind of a few points for influence. With this one, I sort of subtract a few points because it's so new, and I think it's a better movie
Mm.
than the first one. But I'm not sure if the things that we're bothered by in this won't feel outsized as time goes on, that it might age a little poorly in the sense of like, yeah, that mystery isn't really resolved. Um,
Yeah.
it fails to really answer whether Deckard is a replicant or not. I mean, it has problems that can be key problems
Mm.
if you sort of like twist your perspective 5 degrees, and
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
so I kind of like lower this a little, kind of raise the first one slightly and lower this one a little from what my gut is about both.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can see what you're saying, and I agree with things like the mystery and stuff. Um, I go back to that thing you said. You say about like highs and lows,
Mm,
and when um, and the highs of the first Blade Runner film and some of the greatness of that, and even regardless of its influence, compared to its lows, and there are lows in that film, there are problems that you sort of go, okay, it hasn't aged well, and yes, they had to make up multiple versions of it to try and get to something that was really good,
mhm,
but it balances out. It really does balance out to become something I could watch. I can go back to that film anytime, and I feel the same with Blade Runner 2049. Yes, there are quibbles, and yeah, I might be harder on them in the future, maybe. But I think those highs are going to remain. Like this is still going to be a
mm,
film I'm going to sit and go, yeah, no, the whole scene with Dave Bautista at the start of the film and the lingering, at the farm, and then the bits in Vegas and that moment with the toy horse. All of that is
mm.
still going to work, and it's still going to resonate with me. So I think you're right, but I think overall, I think it will end up balancing out in a much more sort of like, it will probably crystallize more over time. One of the things that's interesting to me, and I'll sort of finish on this before we get to the final film, is um how good this film is and how much I enjoy it, and it's sent me off into this sort of supplementary material kind of thing. I'm reading all the comics and stuff, but how sort of like uneven and pointless to an extent the prequel run-up short films and stuff were. Now, again, we've
Mhm.
spoken about them on the Patreon, so I don't want to go through them in detail, but it was just interesting how they feel kind of separate from the film in a bizarre way. And in talking about it again now, I'm like, yeah, the film's really good. It does all this stuff. It's got these things in it. Do you need to go watch those? No, not really, but they can add something. But they don't feel of a piece of this, and
Mhm.
it's kind of bizarre, really, that it's as a sort of we will talk about. It's a weird missed opportunity that still doesn't quite work in my head. Okay, so yeah, final film then. So we're going to be jumping into the final film is 2020's Possessor, by Brandon Cronenberg. We've already mentioned on this program, on this episode, sort of with affection, I think, for his dad, and how it's influenced our thoughts. But
Well,
this
in fact,
film,
David Cronenberg was the first director who we ever did 2 movies by.
yes, yes, we're doing The Fly and Videodrome. So
Mhm.
keeping it in the family with Brandon. Um, but Possessor is an interesting film. In that I've had to sort of go back and think about this film, and it has issues,
Yeah.
but lining up with what I've just said about sort of Blade Runner 2049, some of the highs of this film, some of the things that this film does, I really like that this is sort of going for that sort of like so much hard sci-fi, but is basically sort of going to go for something that's a bit more ambiguous. It's going to have sort of like characters that are a bit sort of darker and a bit sort of like, yeah. I kind of like this film in retrospect. I think this is what I'm going to revisit, and I think needs me to watch again.
I definitely feel like we need to do the other Brandon Cronenberg sci-fi movies.
Mm,
Um, this is definitely a movie made by a talented person. On the other hand, like I like the core idea. It's one
hmm
of these sort of like Inception things where it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do with it? I think what it does with it is less interesting here. it's different. I mean, it's more creepy and bizarre. Um, it's sort of horrific. But, and that's fine. I don't know that Possessor has stuck with me as much as I thought it would.
Mm.
I definitely think it's a good movie. It's a sort of fascinating movie. It makes me sort of like want to see more of Brandon Cronenberg versus more of Possessor, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, I agree with that. I think he's a young, talented director that I'm sure he's going to be offered a Marvel film at some point. But no, I think you're right. I do want to watch some of his other films. I don't know, there's something about Possessor that really works for me. I think there's an element of the weirdness of it that sort of it's not gonna it's not going to hold your hand as much as I thought it would do. I thought this was going to be
Mm.
a bit more straightforward, but it doesn't want to be that. It really wants to sort of make you feel a little bit uncomfortable with things, and then the ending is going to sort of really sort of throw you for a loop, because it makes you ask certain questions about this technology. Like, what do you hold? What the main character, Voss, what is she holding on to from those former possessions that she's done? And there's that whole scene where it's sort of a warped version of her as a mask being worn by her previous possessors, but like looking over her children and doing all these things, and it's like it's so visually wonderful, like really creepy, really weird. And then the whole end piece where she kills her son, but they make it, there's this whole thing of like, well, who is in control at that point? Well, it's clearly her rather than the other guy and all this other stuff. Like, it's just interesting that like they're not giving you like a redeemable assassin. They've sometimes done this, haven't they, where they go, oh, they kill people, but those people thoroughly deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, no, this is a contract. It's like done for money. These people could be anybody. We're going to ruin a number of lives doing it, but we get paid. That's the job. And she is kind of hard and callous. And the fact that this job's had an effect on her, and she has to shake off this possession in order to re-greet her husband and child and all this other stuff. All that stuff really stays with me, that they've done this. And also, it's a female character, that they've done it with a woman rather than, not to be misogynist, but to be a man would be the typical thing, wouldn't it? This thing of like, oh, the man's the one that can shake off the emotions, but to try and do it with a woman and the child makes it that little bit more hard hitting, I think. So, yeah, no, this film definitely sort of stuck with me.
Yeah, I think you've identified its strengths very well. I certainly like that visual with the face, and again, I like the central premise. Um, and it certainly goes somewhere. There's also the sort of like conspiracy of her handler and how much her handler knows and has set all of this up, right? Because
Yes.
somebody's possessed that child at the end. Was this all to make her a more sociopathic, possessor to keep her on the team? I'm not entirely certain, but there's clearly something going on there. In a way that enriches the plot, in a way that's also frustrating because, I want a definitive answer.
Yeah. Well, it does that thing, doesn't it? Like you say, it introduces this thing of her mental stability. Like, is it by removing her family and pushing her closer to the edge? Does that make her a better killer and therefore a better asset? Or is this a breakdown of everything and it's all a bit of a clusterfuck at the end? It's never entirely clear. And I do get that frustration. But I still like the fact that to me, this ending, I think, is quite clear, that it's showing, this thing of how she's regurgitated. We've said this about sort of, again, a comparison with Blade Runner, that baseline test that's run. She goes through a similar thing, but she's able to just regurgitate this information every time. Like, she's memorized the things she's got to say. And then she's sat there holding that butterfly that she killed when she was younger. And she's left just sort of lingering, looking at this thing she's killed. it's very much a sort of a symbolism of the child pulling the wings off an insect kind of thing. To me is indicating what this means. So I think this film was very good, creepy, and sort of like I'm definitely going to go back to it at some point.
Well, I agree, and I can't wait for us to cover more Brandon Cronenberg stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you chose this film. I gave it a 6.5.
Okay, I gave it a 7.
Very close.
Yeah. Again, like it's not perfect. I think there's a lot, there's more to be done. But yeah, I definitely want to see more of his work. I definitely think this is a direct to watch. And we'll definitely try out some more of his stuff.
Oh, for sure.
So there we go. Though we've gone through those films, and what a hell of a season! Like, go back to see the mid one. I'm not going to give everyone scores right now because that's another 20 minutes of going through. I think that to go through them all, but we'd probably post them. Actually, probably we'll put them up as a grid, and we'll post them on social so you can see what we scored them.
Well, I can tell you that first half you were averaging for the first 12 5.75, and I averaged 5.79, and you've averaged 6.17 for the second half, and I've averaged 6.65. So I think Battle Royale, threw me. I can't believe I rated Hitchhikers higher than you did.
Yeah, no, I think it's just I'm looking back at the other stuff, that earlier stuff, and there are a lot of considering we did some good stuff, like we did, Wrath of Khan, I gave an 8 to and stuff, but there's a couple of low points in there as well, I think, that really sort of brought that down. But yeah, no, I think the second half's been really strong.
So I think, looking at, Godzilla Raids Again was definitely well, what's interesting is Godzilla Raids Again is tied with Tokyo Gore Police for you.
Yeah, for different reasons, but yeah.
And Hard to Be a God. You gave both of those a 4. It's fascinating. Godzilla Raids Again. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know that was. Yeah, that was your lowest rating ever. You had never given a 4 before. You've now given 3 4s.
And they're all to foreign films, so I need to up that game. As in be a bit more. Well,
that colonial Brit mentality.
That's exactly what it is. Yes, all films where the Empire didn't get to. So yeah, but I think it's just been a fantastic season. But this isn't the end. This is obviously season 4. We've done season 4, and as we always do, that we do other seasons. We've got an inter-season, I just say break, an inter-season sort of like group project. There you go, inter-season project.
You want to announce what it is?
Yeah. So people know what's coming, and then we're going into season 5, and season 5's got a bit of a twist to it as well. So, no, Julian, you go ahead. I'll let you announce. You sort of, these were, I think, both sort of your ideas, really. So.
Well, I think we came up with the inner season together. The inner season is we're going to do Black Mirror. Since we specialize in British sci-fi, we've done Red Dwarf and Doctor Who. Let's do Black Mirror, and also ties in well with us doing Twilight Zone.
Yeah,
and sort of anthology shows.
It was also
really being the inheritor.
It was an unofficially announced, but Netflix announced the season 6 of Black Mirror coming very soon. So that could be interesting.
True. So we'll be able to cover that. Certainly by the time we get up there, we'll have covered that.
Yeah.
And then season 6,
season 5.
Season 5. Thank you. So season 6 of Black Mirror is going to come out. Right. So season 5 of the podcast here will be the first podcast that has a theme. And so that theme, for every time that you say we're doing season 5, I'm going to just interrupt you and say, Apocalypse. I'll be your wrestling announcer. And so in honor of hopefully we'll get Furiosa by the end. We'll be doing the Mad Max films and a bunch of other stuff, and probably look forward to that in the the beginning of as we turn to 2024.
Yeah, but that's it. You know, we're going to be doing a post-apocalyptic season, and by that point, to be fair, we might be living in a post-apocalypse. So it may be prophetic. We don't know. But yeah, we're going to do all kinds of films. We've got Mad Max. We've talked about a bunch of films, and this isn't going to be just on the main feed. This is going to be we're going to be obviously covering some. I don't want to say lesser films, probably lesser known films, and some of the films as well on the Patreon. I'm going to throw it there. We're definitely going to be doing Hell Comes to Frogtown on the Patreon. But yeah, there's so many post-apocalypse films. You know, so everything from we talked about. I can't remember what's going to be on there, but Mad Max, Book of Eli, Tank Girl.
I think we vetoed Book of Eli. I don't think that's on there right now. But we have Tank Girl on there. Well, you know, we talked about genius of Waterworld this season. I mean, you know, we've got to have the Postman on there.
Yes, more Kevin Costner. That's what the world needs.
Oh, yes. That's speaking of steering toward the apocalypse. You know, I'm pretty sure that there's a tie between that and people who like Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
Never seen it myself, but
nope. Well, it's ending after season 5 because he's leaving, so that's all I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got some fantastic films in the mix there, and again, not just your standard ones. We've got some sort of some unusual fare.
There's no way you and I don't want to talk for 3 hours about Beyond Thunderdome. I mean, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are both huge fans of that movie.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to be, you know, we're going to be coming in. I'm going to be wearing my full Tina Turner cosplay, and carrying my saxophone. That film is phenomenal. So we will definitely.
Honey, the Tina Turner cosplay is my job.
Yeah, Thunderdome is going to be the pinnacle of this season. But again, got lots of things in there, and thinking beyond. I mean, you know. They said the projects we've got going on at the moment. We're talking about not sci-fi, but more things. Julian and I are discussing doing Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese director. A whole bunch of stuff we're going to talk about his films, and that may be available. Well, we're talking about how that's going to be available, possibly through a Kickstarter, through other things. But bringing us back to, it's sort of been announced, but bringing us back to Stories Out of Time and Space. The other thing that we're doing is Stories Out of Time and Space, the essays. I'm going to mention it again. So
the book edition.
The book, that's right. 6 essays each based off the first 3 seasons we agreed? I can't remember.
Yeah.
The first 3 seasons.
Yeah, first 3.
So we have got a number of things we're going back onto there. We're going to be talking about all kinds of films in there, so we'll be starting that. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I look, I'm going to give you a bit of a hint. Right? I wanted to talk to you about this stuff, but this is an announcement. I'm going to give you now an exclusive. It might give you a bit of a hint. I will be covering Demolition Man in one of my essays, and having watched some of the films, the essay is going to be called "Hard to Be a Cop," and it's. And it is going to be discussing this idea of the fish out of water in a different time zone and how, you know, sensibilities get placed in different eras. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing that.
I'm surprised you didn't title it "Blue Lives Will Matter."
Yeah, there's puns galore. I think in some of the titles. I've got a Quatermass one lined up as well. So,
oh nice.
But yes. Anyway, for now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Season 4 we've done, and we've enjoyed it thoroughly. And Julian, thank you very much for introducing me to Hard to Be a God, which is a film I will never forget.
Well, we introduce each other to things we like and things we don't like.
Exactly.
But this has been a joy. It always is. I can't believe we have finished this year-long project. It really has been an incredibly ambitious project for us, and obviously is leading us in even more directions to even more ambitious projects. So it's been a joy, and I want to thank everybody who's listened.
Yes.
I mean, because we want the listeners, this is meaningless without you. Tell a friend, and we really appreciate it.
No, we do, and we, like you say, we're not just doing the mainstream films. We do other material. So, and we want to hear. So, if you do like what we do, leave a review. If you like that we do odder films or we don't, let us know. But if you like what we are doing, and you like the discussions that Julian and I have, do check out our Patreon. There's a link down below, and we are now doing that supplementary material of all those little bits and pieces linked with the main feed, as well as trekking through the Twilight Zone, our progression through all the Twilight Zone episodes, and me doing 30-minute thoughts and getting creators on for Creator Corner. So, yeah, lots of things going on. Go check out our Patreon. Anyway, for now, Julian, as always, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we shall see you in the Black Mirror.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.